They laughed like it was nothing. Like the years I'd spent swallowing every insult, every quiet dismissal, had meant nothing at all. My cousin lifted his beer and said my name the way people do when they think they own the room, when they think you won't answer back. And I didn't. I smiled, same as always, because silence was the only thing that ever kept peace in this family. But inside, something cracked. It wasn't anger. It was colder than that. It was the realization that no matter how much I gave, they'd keep taking, keep rewriting the story until I disappeared from it completely. So I sat there, nodding along to their laughter, feeling the weight of every unspoken word I'd buried just to belong. And for the first time, I understood. Belonging wasn't worth the silence it cost. My name is Maureen Blake. And that night, I made myself a quiet promise. The next time they turned my worth into a joke, I wouldn't stay quiet. The lake smelled like summer and smoke, like every year before. Beer foam, grilled meat, and pride thick enough to choke on. The Blake family knew how to fill a yard with noise. Laughter rolled over the water, and I sat where I always did, at the edge of it, the quiet one among men who mistook volume for worth. Derek stood near the grill, center stage in his father's backyard. He looked like a recruiting poster come to life. Broad smile, loud voice, too sure of his own stories. Around him, neighbors and cousins listened as if he were some kind of legend. Every tale he told was another round of applause for himself, another nod from Colonel Wyatt Blake, the man who'd built him in his own image. I watched the fire catch under the ribs, flames licking the air, and felt something burn low inside me. He raised his beer again, threw another joke across the table. The crowd erupted. Even my father tried to laugh, his eyes fixed on his plate. I lifted my glass, pretending to join them, but the smoke stung deeper than it should have. Behind the smell of charcoal was another one, metal and fuel, hot wind and panic. A voice screaming over the radio, my own voice cutting through it. They toasted their stories. I remembered the ones no one was allowed to tell, when the laughter faded into the crackle of the fire. I stood and walked toward the lake. The surface mirrored the sky, perfect, untouched, dishonest. Beneath it, I saw the face of a woman who'd had enough, if they ever laughed again. I promised myself it wouldn't echo unanswered. A week later, an email appeared in my inbox from Fort Lejeune Air Command, the same base where everything had started and almost ended. Need you to speak on flight safety protocols, it said. I almost deleted it. Instead, I drove down the coast, the hum of the highway mixing with the unease I'd carried for years. The airfield hadn't changed. The same stretch of concrete, the same salt wind, the same dull whir of blades slicing through air. I stood at the edge of the helipad and closed my eyes as a training chopper lifted off, the downdraft hitting my face. Hot and oily. The smell of jet fuel pulled a memory straight out of the wreckage. Fire, smoke, the crackle of a dying radio, and the sound of men I'd refused to lose. In the archive room, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Didn't think I'd ever see you back here," Ross Dyer said. He'd aged, but the same calm in his eyes. He stepped forward, pulled me into a quick hug that smelled of dust and coffee. "Reaper 1, he murmured. "I thought we'd lost you." I stiffened. "Don't call me that." Ross studied me for a moment, then sighed. "You know he never said a word, right? Wyatt Blake. He knew it was you who pulled him out, but he chose silence. It felt like the floor tilted beneath me. He told me Wyatt had written in his after-action report that the SEAL team had extracted themselves. He said it was better for his son's image," Ross added, bitterness scraping his voice. "Derek was working PR for the Navy then. Guess who wrote the official release?" I didn't have to guess. He slid a folder across the table, photocopies of the report. My name, Lut M. Blake, slashed out in red. Beneath it, a single word. Classified. "They buried your name," Ross said quietly, "but not your truth." I traced the red line with my finger. All that smoke I'd swallowed, all the silence I'd worn, it suddenly felt heavier than the rotor of any helicopter I'd ever flown. Standing outside again, I looked up at the sky over Lejeune, the blades still cutting patterns in the clouds. If they ever laughed again, I thought, I'd make sure this time the sound didn't end with me. That evening, I drove to my father's house. The porch light flickered like it always did, the boards creaking under my boots. He sat out front, polishing an old aviator's watch, the one that had survived 3 deployments and a lifetime of storms. I told him everything. He didn't look surprised, just breathed out slow, the way he used to after landing a rough flight. I knew, he said finally. Wyatt owes you his life, but this was never mine to tell. When you're ready, you'll speak for yourself. No one else can. His words settled over me like ash. 2 men, 2 kinds of silence. One born of love, the other of cowardice. I walked the road by the lake afterward, gravel crunching beneath my shoes, the water dark and endless beside me. The wind carried the old sounds back, the radio hiss, the metallic groan of rotors, the panic of voices over static. Reaper 1, we're hit! And my own voice, calm even when my hands shook. Hold position, I'm coming for you. They'd lived. I had, too. But somewhere between the rescue and the paperwork, I'd been erased. The night sky stretched above me, black as burned metal. I looked up and made the same promise I'd made the night I walked away from that fire. I would wait for the right moment. And when it came, they'd learn that truth doesn't need a microphone to be heard. As I turned back toward my car, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. Only one line of text. They're planning to honor Derek next summer, at the lake. Cold washed through me, steady and sure. So that was the plan. Wyatt would let his son stand beneath the same flag, retelling a lie I'd once risked my life to make possible. This time, I'd be there when he did. Autumn came back to Lake Crescent with its usual chill, the kind that seeps into bone and memory. A letter had arrived a week earlier, heavy with the Blake family crest. Reunion of honor, it read, followed by a single line that stopped me cold. Hosted by Colonel Wyatt Blake. I told myself not to go, but I went anyway. The hall by the lake was draped in flags and ego, the kind of place where men told stories louder than they lived them. White tablecloths, patriotic music, the scent of beer and cologne masking something older. Denial. Maybe. Derek stood at the podium, perfectly staged under the spotlight. He wore a Navy-style uniform he'd had tailored for occasions like this, polished to the point of fiction. Our family has always served this country with honor, he said to the crowd, my father in the SEALs, and me, mentoring the next generation. The audience laughed and applauded like a well-trained choir. From my seat, I caught Wyatt's eyes. He sat still, jaw tight, not proud, not ashamed, just frozen. When Derek's speech ended, he strutted over, beer in hand, grinning. You came! Didn't expect the simulator queen to show up? I placed my drink down, let my words land slow. Simulators don't crash. Derek, real ones do. The laughter died in a single breath. Someone coughed. Wyatt's eyes flared in warning, but I didn't look away. The air shifted. People sensed it. An unspoken current between us that didn't fit the evening's script. Later, the crowd moved outside to the bonfire, their voices blending with the lake wind. That's when I heard a familiar gravel voice, Sergeant Nolan Pike, an old SEAL who still carried the ocean in his lungs. He clapped Wyatt on the shoulder, laughing. Sir, you still owe me a beer for that night in Aden. Remember the pilot who pulled us out? What was her call sign again? Wyatt hesitated. For a second. He wasn't the commanding officer, just a man cornered by memory. His lips moved barely above a whisper. Reaper 1. I froze. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. He'd said it, my name in a language no one else recognized. Derek rolled his eyes, stepping between them. Oh, come on, Dad? You're telling that old story again? Those pilots just followed GPS. Real courage is on the ground. Awkward laughter rippled through the group. Wyatt looked down, shoulders bent beneath a truth too heavy to lift. He didn't correct his son, not even this time. I walked away before the noise swallowed me. Out by the lake, the moon fractured across the water like broken glass. He said my name out loud. I whispered to the waves, but not for me. I didn't have to wait long. Men like Wyatt Blake never sleep well after shame. He found me on the sand, the fire behind him, throwing long shadows across the shore. The wind tugged at his sleeves, glinting off the pale scars along his hand. The same hand I'd once seen reaching up from black water. You knew. I said. He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded. You let your son erase my name. You let me vanish so he could look like a hero. Wyatt set his beer down, the aluminum denting under his grip. His voice came rough, stripped of rank. I didn't want him to feel small. He's built his whole life trying to live up to mine. I thought, silence would protect him. It protected your ego, I said. He turned toward the lake, eyes wet in the firelight. I'd seen men look that way before, the ones who realized too late that silence has a body count. He finally spoke again, softer. The original report had your name, Late M. Blake. Derek was with Navy PR at the time. He said it would confuse the narrative if we mentioned a civilian rescue pilot. I let him change it. I didn't think it would go that far, but it did. Between us, the night thickened. The only sounds were insects, waves, and far behind us, the fading laughter of people still living in a story that wasn't true. If you really believed in honor, I said, you'd tell the truth, even if it tears your family myth apart. Wyatt met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw the soldier I once saved, tired, hollowed out, stripped of pretense. Maybe it's time I do, he said. He stared at the fire a long while, then looked back toward the house where his son's voice still carried. When I turned to leave, the reflection of the flames rippled across the lake, gold bleeding into black. Ross's words drifted through my head again. They buried your name, but not your truth. That night, watching Wyatt's silhouette against the fire, I knew the truth had started to surface, and once it did, it wouldn't go quietly back under. A year after the night by the fire, the Blakes gathered again. The invitations called it the Family Honor Ceremony, a tribute to Colonel Wyatt Blake's Silver Star that had somehow become a celebration of Derek. His photo was on every flyer, his grin on local news, his ego in full bloom. I hadn't planned to go. Then that morning, Ross Dyer's message appeared. Going to the lake tonight. You might want to see this. By dusk, I was driving toward Lake Crescent, the Reaper 1 coin heavy in my pocket. The closer I got, the thicker the air became, smoke, heat, and memory, all tangled together. The house glowed with string lights. Country music blared from cheap speakers. The smell of ribs and whiskey drifted across the water. Wyatt sat at the head table, his smile tight, his eyes restless. Derek owned the crowd, voice booming, gestures rehearsed. To the real fighters, he said, raising his beer. The ones who didn't just fly above danger, but met it like men. Laughter followed. Wyatt's jaw clenched. I set my drink down. Funny, I said. Some of us faced it head-on, from the cockpit. The noise stopped cold. Derek's grin faltered, eyes turned my way. Wyatt shot me a look, sharp. Warning. But it was too late. Then a voice from the back cut through the smoke. Reaper 1 would know about that, huh? Everyone turned. Sergeant Nolan Pike and Commander Ross Dyer stood near the deck, sleeves rolled, beers in hand. Colonel? Nolan called, loud and slurred. You never told me your niece was the pilot who pulled us out of Aden. Silence swallowed the yard. Wyatt froze. Derek frowned. What's he talking about? Ross stepped forward, holding up a small flash drive. Maybe this will help refresh your memory. Someone plugged it into the projector meant for family photos. The screen flickered, grainy footage, black waves, a burning horizon. Over the chaos came a woman's calm voice. This is Reaper 1. Hold position. I've got you. It cut through everything. The crowd turned toward me, then to Wyatt. Realization dawning. Outside, fireworks erupted over the lake, red and white bursts lighting Derek's pale face. Wyatt's hand trembled around his beer. I rose. My voice was calm. You wanted a story. Derek, here's the ending. I walked away. The silence behind me, heavier than the smoke. The fireworks had barely faded when Wyatt's voice broke through, sharp, commanding. Derek, apologize. Now. All heads turned. Wyatt stood on the deck, collar undone, the weight of a commander back in his voice. For what? Derek stammered. For mocking the pilot who saved your father's life. The crowd froze. The only sound was the water hitting the dock. She flew through fire to pull my team out, and you erased her name to make yourself look important. That's not courage, it's disgrace. Derek's voice cracked. I didn't know it was her. You knew, Wyatt snapped. You edited that report. Wyatt stepped closer. Apologize. Now. Derek swallowed. I'm sorry. I looked at him, then Wyatt. It's fine, I said. Though it wasn't. Wyatt reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass coin. He placed it in my palm. For the one who flew through fire. The last fireworks burst, red and gold light reflecting off the water. His eyes glistened, not from guilt, but peace. I closed my hand around the coin. No more silence. Colonel? He nodded. No more. And for the first time in years, the quiet that followed didn't ache. It settled. The smoke drifted across the lake like an ending finally earned. 3 months after the night at the lake, the phone rang. The voice was steady. Official. Commander Blake, you are requested to attend the commendation ceremony at Norfolk. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. My name, my title, spoken like it finally belonged to me. I drove to Norfolk at sunrise. The Reaper 1 coin in my pocket, pressing into my palm with every mile. The hangar bay glowed under strips of gold light when I arrived. Rows of uniforms lined the floor, the air thick with discipline and pride. When they called my name, I stepped forward, heart pounding, and there he was, Wyatt Blake, front row, standing straighter than I'd seen him in years. The announcer's voice echoed, for extraordinary courage in a classified rescue near Aden. Wyatt moved before the applause could start. He stood at attention, raised his hand, and saluted me. The hall fell silent. Then, one by one, every SEAL in the room followed. The rhythm of boots against the floor shook the air. I saluted back, hand trembling, eyes stinging. It wasn't noise that honored me. It was silence. Afterward, Wyatt approached, placing his old SEAL cap in my hands. You make the uniform look better than any of us ever did, he said. I smiled through the ache. Don't exaggerate, Colonel. Not this time. Outside. The wind smelled of jet fuel and salt. Wyatt handed me an envelope. Your report. It's been declassified. He looked at me, voice rough. You shouldn't have had to wait for me to speak, but you did. I said, no more silence, Commander. We shook hands. 10 years' worth of ghosts finally stood still. 2 months later, another envelope arrived, creased, smudged, addressed in handwriting that leaned too hard on every line. Inside was a single page. Aunt Mo. It began. I've started working with Veterans Outreach. I finally get it now. Silence can save people, or destroy them. I'm sorry it took me this long to understand the difference. I read it beneath the porch light, the same one that hummed over my father's old chair. The wind from the lake lifted the edge of the paper, rattling it softly like the breath of something finally at rest. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward Derek, just a kind of quiet exhaustion that felt like peace. Later that afternoon, Wyatt came by. He didn't knock, just stepped onto the porch, his steps slow but steady. He laid a folder on the table, the Aden Rescue Report, reprinted. My name printed clean and unblemished. Let's see. Maureen Blake. They'll release this to the archives, he said. Your name will stay there. Forever. I looked from the page to him. I didn't do it for history. I know, he said softly. You did it for home. Then he pulled from his coat pocket the silver star he'd once been celebrated for and placed it beside the report. This was mine, but it's always been yours. I shook my head. Keep it. Let your son see it every day, so he remembers what real courage looks like. He nodded, something breaking gently in his face. A week later, he gave that same medal to Derek. You can keep it, son, Wyatt told him, but remember, the one who earned it taught you what it means to deserve it. That evening, the wind picked up, scattering loose pages from the porch into the lake. I didn't chase them. Wyatt just watched them drift away and said, let it go. The truth's finally where it belongs. The light faded, gold across the water. I slipped a hand into my pocket and felt the edge of the Reaper 1 coin, still cool against my palm. No more silence, I whispered. 10 years later, I returned to Lake Crescent. Wyatt's old house had become a small veterans gallery, the scent of pine and polished wood still the same. On one wall hung 3 photos, Wyatt in uniform, Derek shaking hands with veterans, and me in the cockpit of my helicopter. Beneath mine, in Wyatt's neat, shaky handwriting. It read, Reaper 1, the pilot who brought them home. Caleb, Derek's son, was wiping the glass with a soft cloth. He looked up. Aunt Mo, were you scared when you flew? I smiled, kneeling beside him. Always. That's how you know you're alive. The porch door creaked, and Wyatt appeared, cane in hand. He moved slowly now, but his eyes carried a peace I'd never seen before. I reached into my pocket and placed the Reaper 1 coin in Caleb's palm. Keep it. Let it remind you that courage isn't loud, it's steady. Sunlight hit the coin, throwing gold across our faces. Wyatt smiled. You made this family understand what service really means. I laughed. Took a few barbecues to do it. Outside, a helicopter passed over the lake, its sound low, steady, and whole.